Welcome to Bodybuilding Unplugged.
The new podcast keeping you up to date and behind the scenes for the competitive season and beyond.
With your hosts, director and head coach of Team Poser with Hannah and competitive natural bodybuilder, Hannah Mitchell.
And DFAC Pro and multi-time British figure champion, Zena Al-Kalabi.
Tune in and let us know what you think.
Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of the new season of Bodybuilding Unplugged. Today we have actually kind of based this episode off a question that we got asked on the Bodybuilding Instagram page, and primarily it's discussing balance in bodybuilding, but specifically answering the question as to whether or not we think balance does exist in bodybuilding or not. So the question itself was about our approach to off-season and balance, and whether or not we thought balance exists. So I guess before we get into that question, Hannah, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. This week, I can't believe it's another week. Like, this week seems to be actually quite ridiculous, but I feel like I might say that every single time, so it's probably like a broken record. How about you? How are you?
Yes, I am good. I feel like I'm actually back just into like a normal routine now. I had a bit of like a crazy, for anybody that reads my MBW log, you would have seen, but my weight spiked from like 142 to 148 pounds in the space of like 4 days. And then the next day went back down to 144. So my body has been, everywhere this week. But now we are settled, and I'm in a nice place in my cycle. So I feel good.
That's a trend cycle. Yeah, no, it really is. Yeah. I mean, I had like a really disturbed sleep last night. There was this thing it was actually not very nice. This event that happened outside, like a guy was trying to like get into our cars. But anyway, so I could not sleep. So this morning I woke up literally like a kilo heavier, and I was literally like, okay.
Okay. Such sensitive little souls, aren't we? Like, I always think that. I was like, one thing changes and my body's like, yep, nope.
And don't you find it like, I find it pathetic sometimes when I almost like have to explain that weight jump, like, because I'm like, that's obviously stress. Why are you stressed? Because there was a man outside. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, this is kind of, I guess, the perfect little segue, because we are deep in off season. Yes, you're post diet. Yes, I'm post diet, but we're still in off season, right? Yeah. And we're still measuring our weight daily. We're still doing those things daily. And for us personally, that is what we want to do. So I guess the first part of the question that Rosie asked, shout out Rosie, was your approach to off season. So whether for you personally, would you find that there's a big differentiation for you between when you start prep or when you flick into off season?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I kind of have mixed feelings on this, because like when I guess talk to people on Instagram or in person and things like that, like on paper, I always say, off season is no different, except, you eat a bit more, you train a bit harder, well, not intensity wise, but you know what I mean. Like training is better on the whole. And then, when you prep, you just do exactly the same, but eat a little bit less and all of that. And whilst like to a certain extent, and like most of the days are like that, for me, I would say my approach is a lot more flexible in off season. Meaning for me, like I really, really value like my life, and bodybuilding for me is such a huge part of my life, but it's not my entire life. So for me, when I prep, I am like 100% all in. Like I will isolate myself to the point where every part of energy I have is for my prep. And in order to do that, I need balance in my off season. Otherwise, before I know it, I'm going to be like mid-30s, 40s, and I wouldn't have done things that I want to do. What about you, like in general? Are you the same?
You know what, like, so similar of like when you put it on paper, then it sounds exactly like that. Like I do the same day in, day out. Like I can wake up one day and it's like, oh, it's prep. Like it's actually such a relevant topic, because my last check-in on Monday, Cuba said to me like, we're coming towards the end of this phase now. I want you to treat the next couple of weeks like as you would prep, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I was literally like, so nothing changes then?
Yeah.
Because it really doesn't. That being said, I agree entirely. So where, for example, I would like maybe swap out my carb sources, like I swap foods a lot more regularly now than I ever have done, but it's because I've got the education to allow that.
Yeah.
And like little things like later nights, like sleeping it, like, you know, that sort of, if someone says, oh, would you like to train? And I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's like almost make up a session together. Like I'm absolutely fine with doing that. Or even potentially swapping sessions here and there. Like, that in prep, none of that happens.
Absolutely not. And same for me, you know, like in prep, like I will not swap my rest days around. I will not swap my sessions around. I will not swap my meals around. Like it's, for me, like prep is black and white. And when I worked with 3DMJ, and their approach is still very flexible, even in prep, like they allow off-plan meals and things. I said to Brian, I was like, I have to be black and white in prep because that's the way it works for me. Whereas, you know, you and I, we both thrive off routine. So naturally in the off season, you know, I still wake up and I want my meals at my meal times. And, you know, I want to do my steps and I want to do my sessions. But then like on the odd day, if someone was like, oh, like, you know, do you actually just fancy like going and getting a coffee? And like, I won't just get a black coffee. And I know like a lot of people like are like, oh, you know, you're wasting your calories having a latte. And I'm like, yeah, but I fucking like a latte, so get over it. Do you know what I mean? Like, get over it. So for me, like, things like that, I'm like, it's 20 grams of carb. Like, I'm in off-season. It's really not that deep.
You're probably going to do more steps on that walk when you've gone for a coffee anyway, right? Like, I agree entirely as well. Like, I think sometimes, actually, if I reflect on my previous off-seasons, you know, if you've got like one off-plan meal a week, if you kind of say to yourself, like, that is the only exact time that I can eat, like, that can actually cause the behaviors, like the overeating and things like that. Whereas if you do say to yourself, well, if there is something that I do actually want, then I am going to allow myself to have that. Then, you know, it may be that, if you do have like a planned off plan, like say you're going out for dinner or something like that, obviously quite different, but it just means that you're not tying yourself down. If someone's got if say my granddad's like, do you want a biscuit, Han? Yeah, I do, granddad.
I do. I actually do want that. And like, don't like a lot of the time, like I will just alter my macros to let things like fit in almost, but like sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and like that's okay as well. It's like I only really kind of, you know, if I can macro things back in, I only really do it so that my baseline, I know where I'm at, and then, you know, when we make food increases and things, like I can actually make them like properly. Whereas obviously if you're having like its and bits every day, you don't actually really know where your food's at. So in terms of that, like I do kind of macro swap things in and out. But like off-plan meals and things, if I'm planning for one, then like it's like, okay, like this day I just won't track it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think one of the main things we probably almost need to like make really clear anyway is because what we're saying, it can be taken in two different ways, in my opinion, because when we're saying that we're flexible, I think if someone lived with us and they were like visually watching us day in, day out, they would be like, whoa, you do not deviate even through off season. So for us saying we're flexible, it's nowhere near the same level of flexibility that, or people saying flexibility is, they shouldn't be using that term because it's not flexibility, it's just not sticking to plan, right? So
I always have this thought, I don't know if you ever used to have it, like I could never be like you could never be a normal person again, right? Like when you used to work in the lab and stuff, like, people would turn up like with no meals prepped or anything, then they'd just go and get a sandwich, like a cheese sandwich, and in my brain I'm like, there's no protein in there. I'm like,
and they haven't at breakfast.
And then like for me, like that's not what we mean by like flexible. Like flexible for me is like swapping rice and sourdough.
Exactly that. Or like if you usually have sourdough and eggs for meal one, you go out for breakfast and you order sourdough and eggs.
So flexible that. Whoa.
that is still flexible, right? Because how many people do we know? And I'm not saying that this is incorrect, but people will choose a way of life, right?
Yeah.
And how many people do we know where even in off season they wouldn't do that until their designated maybe off plan meal, like or maybe day, but even if it's not the exact off plan meal itself, right? And that like they would maybe say suffer, or maybe just like be not happy with the fact that they are actually choosing that, but they feel that they have no choice but to live that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said earlier, like I do think sometimes like that for me would never be sustainable. And I know like you're almost just like waiting for that one day so you can have something different, and then you almost feel guilty after it because it's not your normal meals. Whereas when you kind of like give yourself the freedom to be able to have it when you want it, you actually end up wanting it less. Like now I like, you know, if I get like a coffee here and there or whatever, like I don't think, oh, it's the weekend, it's time for an off plan. Like most weekends now I'm like, oh, like I don't really want anything this weekend, you know, and I end up actually having less off plan. So because I can have it, it's not like a, you know, I have to have it. Which
It's
is
funny. It's funny you say that, because I was on the phone yesterday and I was like, I haven't had my off plan this week. Like within last week, I'd like, because I hadn't had actual plans with anyone. It just didn't happen. And I was like, oh well. Like, I'll just have, because I'm going out for a meal on Monday. So I was like, well, I mean, that's into the next week, but I mean, I'd rather be looking forward to that anyway, right?
Exactly. It's not just getting it for the sake of it, you know. It's like when you actually want something. I'm very like a social person, like in the sense of like I won't ever just like get food. Like food for me is like a social occasion, you know. It's going out for dinner with Ethan or going out for dinner with my friends. Like if I don't have a plan, I wouldn't just go and get takeaway because it's my off plan day. Because I'm like, well, I don't actually want that, you know. I don't really like takeaways as it is. Like I just feel like I'd rather just make my own food. But if I'm like getting dressed up and going out, like I like that.
I hear that entirely. Like a few off plans that I've had over maybe the past couple of months, like post diet, for me, I've actually gone to like the shop, literally, like as bad as it sounds, like there's like a sushi counter in Asda, and I've got it's Yo Sushi, and it's even got like the macros on it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, because of like being on my own most of the time, I've just like some of my off plans have just been that. But even so, like I've still kind of looked at the calories and like not matched exactly, but like calorie matched kind of, because similarly, like at the end of the day, in this phase right now, I want to kind of build my baseline as much as possible, especially when it was around the festive period and things, like having off plans for the sake of it, just like to have excessive calories, it's not going to benefit me in any way, shape or form. And I think that's actually what a lot of people will probably like, it'd be quite like nice to hear of like when you are having an off plan meal, like you don't need to go get a Domino's and cookie dough. But like, I'll be honest, some days it fucking is, but maybe once every 6 months or something.
Literally.
You know?
No, mine's the same. It's like it's not just the problem as well when you have like when you have yourself like one a week, like you almost then just choose like the most excessive thing because you feel like it's your only chance to do that. And it's just like that for me is just like a bad association with it. And you know, that's when you get the like, oh, it's a cheat meal and whatever. And I'm just like, in off season, like for me, like it's not like it's life season almost. Like that's what I say to people. It's like it's just life season, and then you have prep. You know, it's not off. I'm still on, but I'm also living. You know.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I think so. Going into the kind of balance topic of that as well. We spoke just before we started recording the podcast about how that may translate to like, I guess, like routine and achieving your goals, like again in off season. So yes, we've spoken about the food side of things and we've slightly just touched on maybe training, but I think the routine and getting like shit done, so to speak, that shouldn't be lost either, should it?
No, definitely not. Like, for me, like, just coming back to like the question as a whole, like, does balance exist? Like, I think to help us like talk about it, like for me, like my overall point of view is like it exists to a certain extent, but the more flexibility and more balance you have, probably the less productive you have. But it's not point blank. So I think you can have one end of the scale where if you have absolutely no balance and no flexibility, you're not necessarily going to be the best. But then, it definitely comes to a point where there can be too much balance and flexibility, right? And I think it's not like black and white, but it's definitely like if you just kind of just go and wing your training, wing your food, wing your everything, then you are going to be a worse bodybuilder. But if you can kind of like do all of the basics and then have a little bit things that are like good for the soul on top, then I think for me that is what balance is in bodybuilding. It's never going to be normal life. It's not a normal sport. And I think things like routine, sleep, training, like those can't be compromised, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that's so good there, because I think again we've been maybe training for so long. That's why we could almost call life baseline like food baseline, but life baseline. Like our life baseline is so kind of rigid there. That for us that isn't like a negotiable. So like you say, like even if I'll have maybe a later night, I will actually make that decision of be like, well, I am actually going to make sure I get X amount of sleep. So, and that's not me being lazy by waking up later. That's me saying I need that sleep, else I'm going to be suffering for X amount of days. And making sure you're like prioritizing that, because you know how you function and how you feel when sleep and like good nutrition and your training programming is as kind of prescribed, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's just like for me as well, it's like weighing it up. So like just for like an
Yes.
example, my like work Christmas party, right? We were going out for meal. The meal was at like 7 p.m., which it's not a meal time, but it's fine. I can deal with that. But then after the meal, everyone else was going out for like karaoke, drinks, and night out or whatever. And that started at like 9:30, 10. So I obviously, then in my head, I'm like, right, I'm definitely going to go for the meal. I'm going to socialize and whatever. And then at that point, then when it comes to like, shall I go with them to karaoke? I know by going with them to karaoke, yes, okay, weighing it up, I might have a bit of fun, enjoy time with them. But equally, it might be leg day the next day. And I know that extra hour will also probably impact my leg session. And what meant more to me in that moment was my leg session. So I was like, okay, I've been to the meal, I've socialized, but that extra hour isn't worth the compromise of what's going to happen the next day. And people, people there might be like, feels so boring, whatever. But I'm doing it because that's what I want to do. And it took me such a long time to be able to get to the point where I could actually say, do you know what? I would prefer to have one extra rep tomorrow than stay out one extra hour now.
Yeah. And some people like listening to that, they may think like, oh, like that's such a maybe like big compromise, like that you wouldn't go out just for that reason. But it's all down to what makes you happy. Exactly. And I think that's such a big takeaway, because I do understand that. Like I'm not working with another company anymore, but over Christmas, I like met up with my mom and like that side of the family, and they go out. I think they were going out for seeing a band at like a pub, but they were going to somewhere else beforehand. And I went and met them at the place beforehand. And I stayed there for about an hour, and they were like, oh, we're going to go to this place. And it was kind of like, that sounds great. Like, have a great time. I'm going to go home. And it was like, oh, well, you've only been here for an hour. Not in a bad way. That it was just, people want you to feel wanted and included. So
that's nice.
they're saying it. Yeah, they're saying it because, they want you there, basically, right? But it's not a bad thing. But I literally weighed that up of, I am so tired. Like, I've had a lovely time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But you're so right that it takes so long. You have to be so certain in who you are to be able to say that. And I think the biggest like flashing light that is coming to the front of my head right now is how long we've spent being maybe people pleasers
Yeah.
that we don't choose what is going to give us, again, happiness or what's going to be productive.
Yeah.
So choosing what makes you happy, if that people find that weird, or if people
Yeah.
do think, oh, just like have a break, it's
Yeah.
nothing to do with them.
No, exactly. And I think like I first learned that in uni. Like I was like the sort of person that like I thought like saying no would just make me like such a boring person. And like, you know, if I didn't say yes to like every night out, every meal, every this, every that, then like I would be just like the boring one. And like, don't get me wrong, like you will lose friends from it. And like that is fine. Like you have to be fine with losing people, because at the end of the day, like right now, my circle is so small, but then everyone in my circle is supportive, and everyone in my circle, you know, gets it. And for me, that is where I want to be. And you know, initially, you know, when I'd say like, oh, do you know what, like I'm not gonna come, I'd almost be like, shit, like what have I done, like oh my god, is this the wrong decision? But then like I just slowly realized where it's like, do you know what, no, like fucking hell, put yourself first. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I think for me, one of the times was I agreed to do like a like a student exchange thing in, where was I going? I think it was like Thailand. It was like Thailand or something. I don't know. But it was also the year where like I wanted to like do a bodybuilding prep and things like that. And then I actually didn't want to go on the student exchange, but I felt so bad like then saying no, that I was like almost like eating myself up. And I was like, what do I want? What do I
Yeah.
want? And I was like, I don't want to go. And like
Yeah.
then saying like sending the email saying like sorry, I'm pulling out, is almost just like fucking hell, I can choose.
Yes. Yeah, you can choose. Yeah. And it's so important to remember that, because it's all your decision, and it shouldn't be based on like whether it's going to potentially upset someone. Like, as long as you're not going out your way to purposefully upset someone, right? But there are going to be people, when you start putting yourself first, there's going to be people, like you say, that maybe pull away. There's going to be people that think that you're selfish, but those are the people that you don't really want in your life, right? Because the people that see it as you just prioritizing what you need to do, it's like I've said before, when people say like, oh, do you want to meet up, go somewhere on the weekend? And I'm like, that's my busiest time. And for me, doing something on a weekend, that's me having a day off work. Imagine if I turn around to you and said, oh, book a day off work so we can do this. But because it's a weekend, and because it's me dictating my hours, people think like I'm being rude. Like, and it's really not. Like, I would never turn around and say like, no, you need to book a day off work because that's a weekday. So you've got to, that's my quieter day. And like, I've lost a lot of people because of that. And there's going to be times that, of course, like I do make that time for like weekends and things, but you know, you do unfortunately lose people by not even just like choosing bodybuilding, but choosing yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And like even just little things like, you know, someone might send a message like, oh, like, you know, are you free this weekend like to meet up for a coffee? And like I could be, but like I also want sometimes that weekend just for myself. And like, you know, it sounds really selfish, but like I used to be the person that like tried to fit everyone in when they wanted to be, but it was just as simple as being like, do you know what, like, no, I'm not free this weekend, but I can be next weekend. And like just, I'm not doing anything, but I want that time, and that's okay as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, you, to be kind of like sustainable, I think, in life and in this sport, like you need to be comfortable just sometimes just being like, do you know what, like I need that protected time.
Yeah, it's something that me and Paige actually spoke about this weekend, because so Paige is obviously now part of the team and she's starting taking on clients and things like that. So we've obviously had to, in a great way, like set those boundaries of like, we're going to maybe message on this as friends, message on this for work, and like understand that if she replies as a friend and hasn't replied to the work thing, that's completely okay, because we've only got X amount of capacity. So maybe you've done enough work for the day and you need to have that switch off. Yeah. So, and something that I spoke about even on Power Up, like my phone will go on do not disturb at around 7:30, 8 p.m. And I won't respond to pretty much most people unless I feel I've actually got the capacity to do so. But a lot of the time, I get to that time, and I am so zapped.
Yeah.
Like, I look at a message saying, "Hi, you're right," and I'm like,
No, I can't.
no.
Yeah, I ran out of capacity for today.
I'm like, hi. I've got nothing left.
I've got nothing left. I know. I'm exactly the same, and like, you know, I guess that's another point as well. Is like, you don't need to reply to everyone straight away. Like, not every message needs a reply. Like, I'm particularly bad for it, I will admit. Like, I will just leave messages for probably longer than I should, but if somebody needed me, like, I would be there. Like, I have my phone in my hand 24/7. You know, if something was urgent, I would reply. But not everything needs a same working day reply, you know?
Not at all. And unfortunately, this day and age, that is something that is so it's terrible. It's actually something that I really don't like. Now, business is different. Business, very, very different.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know, if it is like friends, family, something like that, like, you should be able to respond when you're ready to respond.
Yeah.
Like, I've messaged like my friend before. It was like maybe 3 days later, and it was you know, I'd been posted on Instagram and things like that, right? But I was like, hey, only just really had the chance to like get back to you.
Look at it, yeah.
Yeah. And that is true. That's not because I'm making an excuse or lying. Yeah, you've been posted on Instagram. Yeah, I have been. But doesn't mean that I've had the actual capacity. Being like on your phone posting a story
It takes
is
no
not
brain energy, right?
no brain energy.
Like, you just, I just screenshot a picture and upload it. Like, that takes nothing. But when somebody asks questions, asks how I am, like, I don't want to give them a "I'm good" reply. I want to reply properly. And that reply properly might take me a while, but that's, you know, if you want a proper reply, you can wait for it.
Yeah. No, it's not brutal though, and it's honest. And I think, but more people need to actually understand that because of this digital age. You know, the thing is, it's not what's hilarious. It's not even like people that have come into this age. It's not even younger people that are like it. Like, my mum's bad for it, right? Like, if she sent me a message and I haven't replied, she'll send me another one the same day. I'm like, I'm not replying.
Okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm not
so
replying. Leave me alone. But that being said, of course, so balance within obviously what we said about eating, training, and like socializing as well. I guess in my head that's kind of covered, I guess, like off season, right? Within prep, we've skimmed past it, but balance, the statement would be that like comes to mind is like, there is no such thing as balance, right? That would be the overall arching statement, because if you are deciding to do something, and actually it does kind of come in with off season, because again, that post that I did yesterday of like, there's going to be a lot of things to do in life, right? So before I do start talking about prep, I'm just going to rewind. There's going to be a lot of things, a lot of like tasks to do. Work can get hella busy. You know, we've spoken about your schedule. Like, you're in the gym at like what, 4:30 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, so that you can get your session done and not have to put your goals on the back burner. Same for me, right? If I've got, you know, 8-9 calls, like video call sessions that day, in-person sessions, whatever it is, my training is always in there, and that is always a priority. And I'm actually very proud of us for that, you know, because how many people that you see that go into business or go into work, whatever career it might be, but you do see it a lot more when people are self-employed. I think it's maybe a money thing, that they're just like driven by wanting to get as much money as possible, right? And it's like they'll put their own goals on the back burner, and they're just like, oh, I haven't had a chance to train because I've been working. That's not a thing.
You know, make the time, you know.
You just have to prioritize.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. Like, for me, like, the term balance doesn't exist in prep. But saying that, like, whilst balance doesn't exist in terms of like prep should be like your priority, in sense of you still need to get your work done. You still need to, you know, you still need to train, prioritize everything like that. I do still think, like, for me in prep, no balance doesn't mean ignoring everything else in my life, in the sense that, like, I'm still very much like, I'll still meet people for coffee, a black coffee, or I'll still, plan to do things with friends, or, on my last prep, I went on holiday. It was very meticulously planned, obviously, and I will still do those things, just less of them. Less of them, exactly, because...
And I don't know if you'll also find, again, like, I hope that anyone listening potentially doesn't, like, take offense to this. Like, I'll almost do it with only certain people potentially, because it will be people that do understand that, like, for example, I've got a little bit better at this, but say, like, if I am lower energy, and you may feel the same, that sometimes if I meet up with people and I'm not this high energy person, people think I'm in a mood.
What's wrong?
What's wrong? And I'm like, I'm absolutely fine. Like, I'm actually really happy. I'm just quite quiet today.
Yeah,
and on prep,
exactly. And I always use the term, like, friends that you don't need a social battery for are perfect on prep. Like, I have some friends where, like, I don't need to talk to you. Like, me and Meg, I'm not gonna lie, on the weekend we had an hour where we didn't even speak. We just sat next to each other, and it was just like, I don't need a social battery with Meg. We can just sit there. We can just, be in silence together. And some people you can just do that with, and it doesn't reflect on, like, people's personalities and things like that, but, like, some people can just be together and it not be draining. Other people, like, you can spend, do a session with them or think, and, like, don't get me wrong, you have an amazing time, you might love that person, but in short bursts, right? So, like, it's almost like finding, like, the right people to do the right things with. And for me, like, people that I maybe need to put a little bit more effort into, like, talking and things like that, it will just be like, okay, we can meet for a coffee, but just for an hour, and then I need to go and, like, do other things. And again, like, setting those limits, honestly, it's so bad, but, like, setting, like, limits on, like, my time is fine as well. It'd be like, I can meet you for an hour, I don't have to spend all day.
Yeah, exactly that. No, that's exactly it. And then again, like we've said, going into prep, all those things, it just means that you are still doing them, like going on holiday maybe. Like, I've been on holiday on prep. I've even got I'm potentially going to be on prep for the Team Pose with Hannah retreat. No issue whatsoever. Like, I've even got I'd already organised it anyway because of potentially other people being on prep. I'm already taking a spin bike with me. So it's like there's a little schedule so people can book in their morning cardio. Like, it just means that nothing is missed. And at the same time, you're not having to be like, nothing's missed. It's just easy.
It's just part of your life, like, it's just part of your day. You still do the same things as you do in off season. You just have to be a little bit less flexible, but you don't have to just isolate yourself from the world. And like we said earlier, some people need that. Some people need to, like, put themselves in a box and not to talk to anything. And it might work for some people, but for 99% of people, that isn't sustainable. And I'm one of those. Ethan could happily just go to the gym, do his cardio, stay in his room, not speak to anyone for the whole prep. I can't do that.
No.
Like, I couldn't. And I guess, like, that's just, like, finding what type of person you are as well. Whether or not, balance helps you or doesn't, because you can definitely do too much.
Yeah, no, you definitely can. I definitely learned that in, like, I think it was my first prep. Like, I was still going to raves. Dumb. Fucking dumb.
30k steps, ain't no problem. Accelerated fat loss.
Like 40, mate. Why were you so peeled in 2019, Hannah?
Oh, raves.
Raves, right? Dumb. But, like,
it's in the rave protocol.
At the same, well, it wasn't Cuba, was it? So, but at the same time, like you say, like, I still did all those things because that's what I did in off season, and I don't regret it. It was just a lesson because I was just a very tired little girl. But at the same time, my work, my responsibilities were very different. I was living at home at that time. I was working part-time for a pharmacy, part-time for a sales team. So they were both jobs I didn't really care about. So I could just turn up, Like, I'm fucked. Just literally standing on the spot in the pharmacy, just getting my rest of my steps. Like, so there's a time and place, I suppose, but I think the biggest thing for us, and that we'll always kind of advocate, is that yes, there is that balance there, and that has then dictated and been maybe the deciding factor for us being in this game so long. Because we have. How many people do you see dip in and out of bodybuilding? Like sometimes just one season, like not even an off season of prep, just a season.
Yeah, like
Some
they're like
people
all
do a
in.
year.
I love this. I'm a hardcore bodybuilder. I'm not doing anything else. Then they've done their show and they're off the grid.
Yeah, because
Okay.
yeah,
And then they slag it off because they
yeah,
say bodybuilding is the worst sport ever, and they have so many negative things to say about it. Whereas they were all in it 6 months ago. It's only because they obviously kind of just didn't do it right or didn't do enough before they did a prep.
yeah. Yeah, and because there are so many ways to do it, like we've just said, like they'll blame bodybuilding for aspects of their life that maybe gone to down the drain. Like I've seen people do posts about like, oh, you'll ruin your relationship on prep. Da da da. No, you won't. Like being on a diet and being on a prep, it doesn't make you an arsehole.
Wasn't that what you posted on your story the other day about like the research into like it actually helps fat loss if you have
Someone put a post. Someone put a post, and it was a dead serious post, and it was like about if you have cuddles, then it's going to lead to fat loss. And I was literally like, well, that's why I obviously haven't got some titles over the past like 5 years. Like, I just was like, what has happened to bodybuilding, man? I saw that and I just thought, Jesus Christ.
people will latch on anything, won't they?
It just made me die.
Happy endorphins lead to fat loss. So there we go. There is your piece of advice from us today. Get yourself a partner.
But yeah, no, very good. Very, very good. But to be fair, I think we've nailed that.
Yeah.
I think that has answered balance in bodybuilding, yes or no, prep and off season, down to a T. But do you have any final remarks?
I don't think so. I feel like that was a good one. It was a good topic, and yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything to do with it, and hopefully people will let us know what they think as well. And I guess just for me, it's like everyone's balance is different, and I know I've said it a few times, but like it's finding balance does exist to a certain extent, but you need to find your balance to be the best at everything, and it takes time, and you will fuck up. Like for me, like I've fucked up my balance so many times where I've put too much into work and not enough into sport, or too much into sport and not enough into work, or too much into relationships. And, finding a balance where you've got just enough of everything is so hard. But yeah, it just takes time. And, if you find that, okay, maybe, I'm working too much, then you know what you need to do. You need to kind of like look at ways to manage that. Or if you're finding, my work's suffering because I'm doing too many external things, and it's finding that. And yeah, I guess it's possible. It just takes time.
It's possible, it takes time, and also I think it really is that you have to be so self-aware, I think, because you said about saying no at uni. I wasn't there at uni. I definitely wasn't there. Like I was still training and I was still doing this and that, but God, I was not there mentally at that level yet. It took me until only a couple of years ago, I think, until I stopped kind of people pleasing, and I stopped and I started focusing on what did make me happy, and yeah, I guess like finding me. But I think, like you've just said there, if your work is starting to suffer because of maybe your training, or if that is the case, then yeah, you do need to think about what at the end of the day, like your livelihood. Like if you're in a career that maybe you can't dictate your hours and etc., and your work is slacking, you probably need to actually have a discussion about like either changing your hours, bringing hours down, or changing your workload. Or it might be that yeah, and then vice versa. If you swap that, if you find that you're working too much and you're not training, like you need to have a word with yourself and be like, right, yeah, you will be losing money if you're working less, but what's more important, right?
I've recently dropped today.
Fill your cup.
Yeah, exactly. Like from you know, most of last year I was doing 5 days, 50 hours, and it got to a point where I was like, do you know what, like, yeah, okay, I'm earning like a decent amount of money, but like I have no time for myself. I have no time to do anything I want, and I'm burnt out. Like I did reach burnout last year.
Yeah.
And then I got to the point where I was like, yeah, okay, you know, I will be taking a big hit with pay if I drop a day, but I'm getting my life back. And now I'm like, okay, like I'm actually happy again. And money, you can always make more money, you know.
Money just literally isn't important. I actually don't care what people
You
say.
have enough to stand on your own 2 feet. Like at the end of the day,
financial freedom, right? So you can go food shopping and not be like, oh shit, is this car going to work?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's different. And I think the final point is, you mentioned it, obviously, like maybe putting too much into relationships and things like that. Like, obviously, I've spoken about like being single for like X amount of years or whatever. And I think when you have, or making sure that you are like waiting for someone that does understand, like the people that I had previously like dated over those periods of time and it had never worked out was because it was like, oh, you're always busy, or you never have time for me and things like that. And you should never be shunned for having goals. Like you should never be like punished or made to feel bad for wanting to work and train and focus on yourself. So you need to find someone that does support you with those goals and that you're able to spend time apart and together.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
And on that note, I feel like that's a nice wrap up. Yeah, I mean, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. We are actually in the process of lining up the next few. So keep an eye out on the stories and we will let you know. And we will be getting some guests on at some point. So give us a message if there is anyone you have in mind that you'd like to come on the podcast. But yeah, another good one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, especially an off the cuff one.
That was, you know, me and Hannah, we always come on and we're like, oh God, like, what are we going to talk about? I was like, we'll just chat. Like,
whoa, okay, we don't always do that. We sometimes have a plan.
Sometimes, yeah. We normally have a rough plan, but today was kind of like we have one question. 45 minutes later.
We can, well, we've got a lot of knowledge to share. But on that note, share this podcast. It was actually really nice. Ari shared it on her story where she was like, I was like, so share it, guys. Get it on your stories. Give us a follow. Give it the Instagram, the Spotify, the YouTube. That's gonna be an island.
I'm in the process, guys. If anybody is a YouTube listener and you've been reverted to Spotify, because I will take it. That is my fault. I am sorry. It will be up.
It's all about balance, guys.
That wasn't a priority, okay?
That wasn't a priority, and that's fair.
Now it is. Season 2 will be up very soon.
Amazing. But have a great day. Oh, God. Have a great day, guys. Have a great day.
Have a great rest of your day.
And we'll see you in the next one. Yeah?